Okay. So everyone, we're recording this and it is going to get posted publicly on our social media channels. So if you don't want to appear in the gallery or the thumbnails of people who are attending this, then make sure that you make adjustments to your video settings by turning off your camera or changing your username, whatever privacy settings you feel are appropriate for you. And also, please feel free to use the chat function if you don't feel comfortable speaking. So, I would like to welcome everybody to our fourth workshop in our Ingenuity on the Edge series, organised by the Digital Design and Development Department at North Island College. So far, we have explored some amazing topics, such as React, digital advertising, and Agile. And today, we are very pleased to welcome Tom Keenoy, Senior Principal UX Designer at SecureWorks. So Tom is quite simply amazing. I can't easily summarize everything that he's achieved so far, but I'll attempt to go through some of the highlights. Tom graduated with a BFA in Communication Design from Pratt Institute and taught design and web development for 10 years at Pratt Institute, as well as for a few years here at North Island College. And he now has over 20 years experience in web design and development. Tom co-founded Medium Rare Interactive in 2006, which is a full-service digital agency that specializes in app and website design and development. And he also founded KiteStrings in 2013, and that's a password manager software for Teams. And as though that wasn't enough, Tom most recently decided to take on bigger challenges than boutique development shop could address by joining the UX team at SecureWorks, which is a cybersecurity platform that is leading the way globally. So today we have the pleasure of taking a sneak peek into what Tom's everyday life at SecureWorks looks like. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge that the North Island College campuses are on the traditional and unceded territories of the combined 35 First Nations of the Nishalnoof, Kwakwaka'wakw, and Coast Salish traditions. Now, this workshop will likely last a couple of hours, and we'll have a break in the middle. So, Tom, does roughly 10:30 work for you for a 10-minute break?
Yeah, it should be fine.
Awesome. And yeah, if you have any questions, so don't hesitate to ask. Everybody will be muted except for Tom and myself, but you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand button at the bottom of the screen, or you can type your question in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll invite you to speak, or I'll read your question out loud for you when the time is appropriate so that Tom can answer it. And for anyone who's just joined us in the last couple of minutes, I just want to remind you that this is being recorded and it will be posted publicly. So if you don't want to appear, then please turn your video off. And that's everything. So Tom, with that, the microphone is yours.
Cool. Thanks so much, Claire. Appreciate the intro. It's great to see a few familiar faces here. Also a few folks that I don't know. Welcome. Thanks for joining me here and joining us at this talk. This was billed as a day in the life, but a lot of the material that I'm covering is background and stuff that I've learned moving into the enterprise UX world. I've been really lucky to be part of a team that really values ongoing education and learning more about the product development space from people who are much smarter than us and are kind of big names in the industry. So a lot of the material that I'm going to cover is gleaned from workshops that I've taken, books that I've read and have taken classes related to. So that's where a lot of this stuff is going to come from. And we will also get to the day in the life stuff of like just what my day looks like. So yeah. Does anybody have any prelim questions before I dive in? Is everything pretty straightforward so far? This interface is a little bit new to me, so I can't actually see when hands are raised while I'm in presenting mode. So I'm leaning on Claire to follow the chat. I can't see the chat at all. Cool. All right. We'll jump right in. What we're going to cover, workshop, we're going to do a high-level interview of the work practices at an enterprise software company. The company that I work at is somewhat unique, but also still an enterprise company. There's universal, maybe not universal, but broadly applied practices and techniques that go across when you get into the bigger teams when you're working B2B, stuff of that nature. So that's a lot of what I'm going to be covering. Talking about team structure, the organization as a whole, project lifecycle and planning, research methods and practices, and then also tools and processes for our UX work. Our UX work really dovetails in very closely into the product management and the development. So the lines of where those things kind of connect are sometimes a little bit blurry, and we have to know enough about each other's jobs to be able to interface well. That's one of the tricky things. So yes, I'm going to be UX specific, but if you're not a designer, you will hear a lot of things that are very familiar to you, like agile terms, product management terms, stuff like that. Yeah. Questions and comments. Claire covered this. I'm pretty informal, so don't feel like you have to wait for the absolute perfect time to get a comment in or a question in. I can't monitor the chat while I'm presenting, like I said. So if you've got a funny, pithy remark, I'm just going to miss it, unfortunately. That face. And if it's something good, Claire, I'm going to lean on you. Or if your internet connection goes down, Ashley to wave a hand and say, Tom, stop. Also, I tend to talk fast, especially when I'm excited about something that I'm presenting. So if I'm going too fast, please tell me to slow down or ask questions or ask me to go back over stuff. And throughout the presentation, I'll pause at regular intervals so that we can engage a little bit around some of the topics if there are questions or interesting threads to pull on. Cool. So I'll dive right in to the organization and team structure of SecureWorks. SecureWorks is a company that's been around for 25 years, a little over 20 years, and started out as a services organization. They provided cybersecurity consulting and monitoring, incident response, and they were computer folks, so they built their own tools to do this stuff. And more customers would say, "Oh, that's really neat what you're doing. Can we get access to those tools as well?" And eventually, the leadership there said, "All right, why don't we try to productize this thing?" It's a very common pattern of we've built internal tools for our own use. Let's try to productize that. That was a familiar story for me for Kite Strings as well. We were solving our own problem and thought that the business said, we can make better margins on software than on services. Services are billed hourly roughly or by engagement, and when you sell software, theoretically you build that software once and you sell it a million times and you make a better margin each time. Not exactly that way because you have to continually iterate, but it's definitely generally considered a better margin industry than a services industry. So the organization is in the middle of a transformation from a services organization to a product organization, and there's a lot of culture shift that needs to happen there. From a services standpoint, the idea is if we can do something, we can sell that, and if we can sell it, we should sell it. So anytime somebody said, "Hey, we want this," they would say, "Can we do that? Can we put a markup on it? Great, let's do it." When you're building a product, that doesn't actually work because if one person asks for something, just putting it into the product because one person asked for it isn't actually a great way to keep your margins. The better margins that you get from a software company. It's also a really good way to make bloated software. So the challenge for a services organization switching to a product organization is learning to say no and learning to say, actually, that doesn't fit. We're not going to offer that feature or that thing that you want, that widget, because it actually, you're the only person who wants it and it's not giving value to any of our other customers. And the frustration level of salespeople who say, I can close this deal if we just get this feature, when we come back and say, actually, no, that one deal isn't worth it for us to develop that feature. There's a bit of gear grinding. So there's a culture shift that's in the process of happening. SecureWorks is owned by Dell, and Dell is, as you all know, a pretty big company. So there's a lot of kind of corporate stuff that happens that needs to be accounted for. But at the same time, the product that we're working on was kind of created as they referred to it as a skunkworks product. I don't know if anybody is familiar with skunkworks. It was like a super secret part of Boeing, one of the big like aerospace companies, and it was all their like top secret research projects that were all just like quietly done in the corner, and nobody really knew about what was happening there until it was kind of pushed out. So the product that I'm working on was actually treated as a startup. It was done by a small team, stood up really fast. A lot of minimum viable product practices went into it. And then the rest of the company didn't even know much about it until it started gaining some more momentum. People started disappearing out of teams in the main company, and then turned out that they were now working on the new product. This is a few years ago, but by the time I joined the company, it was gaining a lot more momentum. People were more aware of it. And there was this shift happening, and it's still ongoing, but the leadership is pretty well aligned around this transformation now. So yeah, a lot more information than what was on that slide. But so once we talk, now that we have the context of the bigger organization, and this is like not unusual in a company where there are these internal shifts and internal initiatives. So now that we have that context, the team structure that we have is one that's been promoted by Marty Cagan and the Silicon Valley Product Group of empowered teams. And there's, I don't think I have the books out here. There are two books. One is called Inspired by Marty Cagan, and the other one is called Empowered. Inspired is the one that really kind of recommends the structure of the empowered team model, where you have product groups that have responsibility for one product in the software. And when we think of product, like if you look at Adobe, Photoshop is not a product in this ideology. Layers might be a product. The auto retouch, I don't remember what the feature is called, might be a product. It's a single kind of workflow functionality goal that somebody is trying to achieve that gets embedded in the software. So often when you're on a development team, you think of this as a feature. But really, it's a feature. It's a workflow or set of workflows that kind of are somewhat self-contained. And the empowered team structure is made up of a mix of product management, design, and engineering primarily. Other roles can end up in an empowered team as well. And the leadership of each empowered team, we refer to as the three amigos. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the triad, or there are other names for it too. But it's the product manager, in charge of that product, the architect or tech lead, and a UX designer. And those are the people who are making the decisions about what to build in that product, what to prioritize, and how to organize that. That's who's going to be organizing your workflow, organizing your sprint planning, organizing your quarterly releases or monthly releases, or whatever release train you're on. They're the ones who are really making the decisions. But it's not really a top-down structure. We're talking about people who are not even at middle management most of the time. These are mostly individual contributors, and the idea is that they are empowered to make good decisions for their product. The method that you may have heard of before, objectives and key results, or OKRs, is kind of, we have a big objective, and that's what we're trying to go for, and then it's up to the empowered team. The team is empowered to meet that objective, and here are the key results that we're going to try to achieve associated with that objective. So the model is very different from, if you've been in an old school traditional, top-down driven, roadmap driven organization. It's kind of a newer way of approaching the way of developing products. And it's been very successful. A lot of the biggest companies out there are adopting or have adopted or even pioneered this model. So it's a good thing. If you haven't heard of it already, you will hear of it if you're going into enterprise software development. So the empowered team researches the needs of their users. So the roles involved there are UX and product management. And then engineering can ride along, of course. There's no, in an empowered team, there's nobody who's excluded from a process, but who's responsible for part of the process or the task is, in this case, UX and product management. Then designs the solutions, which are usually UX and engineering working together to come up with a solution design. And we'll talk a little bit about what the different areas of focus are for each of those in a few slides. But the role there is UX and engineering will say, here's our proposed solution, and then product management will, thumbs up it or say, oh, actually that doesn't fit in because it's, whatever business reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And then establish metrics for success. Like we're proposing that we're going to do this thing. What does success actually look like? How do we measure that? And that's been a big focus in our organization, where we have a feature list and we put the features out, and then nobody ever actually checks back to see if those features were successful. Like how do we know? We put it out there, great, box checked. That's a gap that we're working on filling, of actually measuring success. And then somebody implements the solutions, which is engineering. Occasionally design will get in there to be like, yep, you put the pixels in the right place, good job. But really it's an engineering that's driving the implementation. And then the measurement of the success is UX and product management. We go back into the metrics, we do the follow-up interviews, the user testing, et cetera, et cetera. And then we iterate. We look at what we've done, and then we do it all again and see how we can make it better. So that's the general gist of the empowered team model. A lot of that will probably sound familiar. It draws a lot from agile workflows, yeah, that's the gist of it. What our job is here is really managing risk. Like when we think of what we're doing, we are we're designing stuff, but anybody can design something. Anybody can say, this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to build it, and it's going to go out there. There's a risk there when you build something and put it out there that you have built the wrong thing or built the thing wrong. So there are 4 risks that they talk about in this structure. It used to be talked about as 3 risks, and they've more recently 4. There's risk. Is this something? Are we building something that the customers will buy or that they'll choose to use? We need to know before we go out there and devote the engineering resources to building the thing, whether it's actually something that's worth building. There's a lot of expense involved in building software. Prototypes are relatively easy to make, but actually, production level software takes quite a bit of work. So if the users aren't going to use it or don't want it or don't find value in it, that's a problem. We want to make sure that we have mitigated against that risk as much as possible before we decide to build it. Usability risk is the next one. Sorry, I got a fly buzzing around me here. And that's really where UX comes in more than any of the other places. We're responsible for being aware of the other risks. But usability risk is really for us. So this is whether the users can figure out how to use it. And that's the traditional design. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna look at screen layout. I'm gonna look at cognitive load. I'm gonna look at button placement. I'm gonna look at information architecture. I'm gonna look at all the things that we learn to do as designers, and really test before we put this thing out whether or not this thing is usable. And that's where we get into prototyping and mock-ups and wireframing and all the steps that we take before we get there. And one of the big differences between the old school way of, okay, I'm going to design a screen and then I'm going to get my collaborators around and we're going to talk about this screen that I designed and we're going to shoot holes in it. Is that we're getting out of the building to test this. We're getting out to actual users to look at stuff before we move on to building it. So we're addressing the usability risk by testing early, testing often, and testing with all targeted users. The next risk is the feasibility risk, and this is the engineering level risk. Can we actually build this thing? Do we have the skills that we need? Do we have the infrastructure that we need? Do we have the time that we need to do this? If we're saying, hey, we're going to release this at the end of the quarter, and it turns out it's actually something that we need to recruit for and we need to build infrastructure for, that's not happening by the end of the quarter. It's going to take a month to 2 months to recruit the people that we need at least. It's going to take time to build the infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So the promises that get made are a risk if we're saying we're going to go through and build this thing and then can't actually deliver it or deliver something subpar. That's a problem. So when we're designing stuff, one of our jobs is to really work closely with engineering and talk about not just what we want to do, but whether what we want to do is feasible within the context that we've got. And the last one is business viability risk. We can have something that's feasible, we can have something that's usable, we can have something that's valuable to the customers, but certain other aspects of the business might not be able to support that. We may want to make something and legal comes in and says, actually, no, you can't do that. That's not a thing that you can do legally. There's all sorts of problems there. Some other business unit might say, actually, we're working on something similar and you're going to completely eat our customer base. And there's going to be an internal war over, trying to fit the same feature into two places. So the business viability, and also if there's a business model around this, the customers may think it's valuable and they may want to buy it. It may be usable, it may be buildable, but if it turns out there's only 3 customers who want to buy it and the rest don't, and we're not going to actually gain any profit margin off of that, then it's not something that the business is going to support. Sorry, I lost my charger there. I have to plug that in. So I've covered some ground there. I'm going to take a moment to pause and see if there's any questions. Claire, has anything come in through chat, or does anybody out there have anything?
No, everybody seems quite happy. I just want to mention that I love how you're setting the context here, how you're giving us a high-level view and explaining how your role jives with everything else that's going on in the company. And really, it's the explanation of why your role is important, why you exist in that team. Just loving the context.
Well, great. This is, one of the things that I found as a designer is that, I came through school and people taught me how to design, but nobody taught me why we were designing or what we were designing. And this is really hugely important, and understanding our role makes a huge difference in what we can do and how we approach our jobs. So yeah, I think the background is really important, which is why I'm presenting it. So I'm glad you're enjoying that. Cool. I'll keep going then. So what we produce: screens. No, we don't just produce screens. That's not what we're here for. Not the only thing that we're here for. We produce risk reduction. That's what we're doing. At the end of the day, what we're doing is making sure that the thing that we want to put out into the world actually meets the needs of our users in a way that can be supported by the business, can be created by the engineers, and can be used by the users. If we put in a ton of effort into making something and we haven't properly addressed the problems that we're trying to solve, if we haven't properly addressed the risks that we're putting in there, we're going to invest tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars into building a thing that nobody wants. And this was if you're familiar with Agile and how the Agile Manifesto came to be, this is the same basic concept. Agile was about making sure that the thing that we were building wasn't something that had, months and months of requirements put up around it, and then, months and months or years of development put into it, only to get out onto the market and completely fall flat. The idea is to make sure that we're getting, getting the problems, the actual problems that our users have solved in a way that is going to be beneficial to everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about lean UX. If you've been in the entrepreneurial space, you've probably read the Lean Startup. Lean UX is a similar theme of we're going to try to do the least work that we need to do to reduce those risks, rather than go through and do all of the design work that we need to do and then test all of it in huge studies. What we're looking for is really what is the least amount of work that we need to do to validate our designs. Instead of building, every single screen in an app and prototyping the entire app, can we actually do some of that with a low fidelity prototype with just wireframes? Can we do some of that with a simple card sort? Can we do our information architecture by spending 45 minutes with 5 users each just to get their mental model? And the idea isn't to find perfect, because as we know, perfect is the enemy of done. We're not ever going to get to perfect, but what we can do is reduce our risk enough that that we have confidence in what we launch. So a lot of the research methodologies that we use are really about gaining confidence and reducing risk, and getting out there in the easiest way to do it. So we reduce our emphasis on building specs and screens. We still do those things, but the bigger focus is really making sure that we're building the right thing before we go deep into high fidelity screens, high fidelity prototypes, et cetera, et cetera. We're creating hypotheses and we're testing them. This is really what design is. It's understanding the problem, because once you really understand the problem, more often than not, the problem solves itself. The solution is really apparent if you understand the problem most of the time. And what we're really trying to focus in on is where are the trade-offs that are required for solving the problem. We're going to have user A who wants this thing, and user B who wants this other thing that seem to be diametrically opposed. And we need to find where those decision points are. And so the research that we're doing is looking for those decision points. Understanding the scope of the problem, understanding the problem space, the scenarios that we're working with, and then identifying this or that, which is the more important thing, which user is more important to solve for in this thing that we're doing. Yes, this other thing might be important, but this is the more important thing, so we're gonna do that. So once we get the problem framed that way, a lot of our design work kind of is straightforward. Buttons are buttons. Like, you're not likely to reinvent the button. You're not likely to reinvent the drop-down menu. Most of these patterns are really well established. It's finding where to apply the right patterns, and if a new pattern really is necessary, then we have a good scoping of what needs to happen. Test, iterate, and test. Try to do that rapidly using the lowest fidelity testing that will still answer the question. Answers over artifacts is another kind of principle there. Do we need a mock-up of every single state on every single screen? No, we don't. We can say buttons do these things, and there's a button here. We don't need a mock-up of that screen of every hover state or whatever of the button. We need answers to the big questions, and what is the least we can do to get 80 to 90% confidence that we're answering that question right. And then producing the right artifacts at the right time instead of all the artifacts. We don't need to do a user journey map for every single nuance of every single user. We can create one general journey map and maybe a few small variations for happy path and sad path, and then make some notes on it. Throw some sticky notes on that thing. You don't need to have a 65 to 150 page spec for a product if you can communicate what needs to be done in 15 screens. one of the pitfalls of that, do I cover that? Yeah, risk. We'll get to risk in a few minutes. So moving on, this is the kind of overall process that we're looking for. So we start off at the beginning here of this infinity symbol. What are we trying to do? Who are we trying to do it for, and why? We're trying to understand the problem really at the most fundamental level. There's this idea of 5 whys. If you ask why 5 times, you will really get to the root cause. I need a button here. Well, why do you need that button there? Well, I need that button to do this thing. Okay, well, why do you need to do that thing? What is that thing that you're doing? Why are you trying to do that thing? Well, I need to do that thing because my boss says that if I don't do it, I get fired. That's a weird one. Okay, why does your boss need you to do that thing? Let me talk to your boss. Okay, turns out you don't actually need him to do that thing. What you need is a report, and maybe what you need is an automatically generated report so you don't have to keep asking this person to push that button. So what we need isn't a button. What we need is an automatically generated report, right? So if you keep kind of laddering up that why, eventually you're going to find the root cause of your answers. That's what a lot of our discovery work is about. So from there, we explore, we collaborate, we co-create, and we work with our users to understand their problem. We work with our collaborators to understand possible solutions and not just drop in on the first solution that we come to. We don't necessarily drop in on, I need a button right here. And then we prototype and we say, okay, let's test our hypothesis and see if actually instead of putting a button here, giving the CIO, Chief Information Officer guy, the report he needs automatically would actually solve this problem. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Maybe he actually needs somebody to verify and the button was the right thing in the first place. But at least we've tested that before we went off and did something. We do that discovery, we iterate on that as many times as we need to until we're ready to commit. Once we commit, we build the thing. So far, so good. We have iterated on the designs. We've got a design that we're pretty happy with. It's been tested. Our risk to being wrong has been reduced enough. And then we listen to feedback. We gather feedback, and then we this is like a beta, right? We release the beta. It's out there. We're getting feedback on it, and maybe we need to adjust, tweak, nuance, et cetera, or maybe we've actually done the wrong thing, but we haven't actually gone to a full release yet. So we iterate on the feedback, and then finally we release and measure and get that out there into the world. And instead of a small beta audience, we've got our full audience, and then that comes out, brings us back to here. And we start listening again. We start paying attention and we start looking for what the next problem is to solve. Is it still the same problem? Did we get it right? Or are we on to the next problem? So there's some risk around the lean UX idea that I like to call out, which is when we make stuff, our partners will often hear, hey, this thing is faster. We should do less of these things. We should do less building of artifacts. There comes an inflection point where less is not more, less is still less. Trying to do the minimum, there is actually a floor on the minimum under which you are getting, diminishments. It's not useful to say we're doing lean UX, so we're not going to build a prototype if you actually really need a prototype to test. So the one of the risks there is trying to hit what is the right amount of minimum there. Another risk is that there's already some kind of goal that is out there. Somebody has already made a commitment to shipping a feature at a certain time. And so engineering is already kind of working on this feature, and they say, we're doing lean UX on this, and you've got 2 weeks to validate this idea. That's not really how it works. Like, yeah, I can take your thing and I can tell you you're doing it wrong, but if you're still going to ship it anyway, it doesn't matter. If you've committed to doing this thing by the end of the sprint and it's on a release schedule, there's nothing I can do. That train has left the station and I'm not going to be able to fix that. All I'm going to be able to do is tell you what you did wrong so that you can shake your fist at management for giving you a stupid deadline, which, that's valid too. Like proving to management that their process is wrong is valid, but it's a risk when we start to say we can or should do things faster. It puts the cart before the horse in some cases. And then one of the other things is that adopters sometimes fail to realize that the standard that lean is measured against is the older version of like a 6 to 12 month spec writing cycle. 6 weeks of user testing and iterating on design is still very, very fast compared to that old cycle. So people who are coming at this from a 2-week sprint agile flow, who haven't ever had proper UX collaboration and proper product collaboration, are going to say, why does this take more than 2 weeks? Everything takes 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the sprint cycle. You have 2 weeks, right? So those are some of the risks around lean UX. Yeah.
Ashley actually has a question for you, and I'm going to let Ashley speak for himself.
Cool.
Do you want to unmute your microphone, Ash?
Yep. Hello. I just wanted to post it before I forgot it, but if this is a good time, this is a good time. So the answers versus artifacts idea, I interpret what you said here as like prototype the hard stuff that you don't know, which makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to those answers, I assume there's often many different ways to answer certain questions. Like we all know how to make a button usable, but there may be different implementations of that. So how do you make sure that everybody on the enterprise-sized team has the same kind of idea of what an answer is, while I'm assuming trying to reduce the amount of unnecessary documentation?
So that's a really good question, and that gets into design systems, where which I have kind of at the tail end. I didn't really prepare much in the way of slides, but we'll talk more about. But the short answer is find the questions that people are asking all the time. And put it into a design system. Put those answers. Those are the right artifacts. When you have somebody saying, "I need answers to this," or you have 15 different empowered teams saying, "I need answers to this," there's a good argument to be made that we do actually need an artifact. That is one of the necessary artifacts. So when you have a button pattern of buttons that are related to a form are bottom left because it aligns with the visual access down the left side of the page as people read. You document that. You put that in there, and then when somebody puts the buttons on the bottom right, you say, no, we already have the answer to that. Here it is. It's in the design system. We don't need to have this conversation. It's already been established. I don't care if some designer on Medium says it should be the other way. This is how we're doing it in our enterprise software. That conversation has been had. Thank you very much. And then if it does need a bigger conversation, you take that up with the design system team. You put it out there, and somebody prioritizes: is this a thing that's worth considering? Or is this just going to be a marginal improvement of 1/10 of 1% of conversion rate on a thing that doesn't actually make you any money, right? Not a conversation worth happening. So it allows us to prioritize. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Cool. All right. Anybody else got anything while we're there? While we're on a pause?
I think we're good.
Okay, keep it going then. So, agile versus UX. This is an area where anybody who is dropped into an agile development team that's on this 2-week sprint cycle. One of the most common things that is seen out there in the development world is the misapplication of agile. The first thing on the Agile Manifesto, if I remember correctly, is people over process. And in Agile, there's become this fetishization of the process of Agile, missing out on all of the parts that are the this over that. And rather than going in and saying, hey, these things aren't working, or these things are not getting us the results we need, people are like, no, this is agile. This is, we're doing 2-week sprints. No, we're doing a 15-minute scrum. And it can't, we can't go over 15 minutes. And whatever the other rituals are that have been attached to agile, often the team gets more stuck in those rituals than in the actual outcomes that Agile is looking to produce. So yeah, the last thing is it's not agile if you're not testing and iterating. So one of the common symptoms of agile dysfunction is I've shipped it, it's done. If you're not measuring it, if you're not testing it, if you're not iterating on it, you haven't actually reached the outcome that you're looking for. And we'll talk more about this outcome driven process in the next few slides. But the idea here is that rather than have UX slow down the agile process, we need to rethink how UX interfaces with that agile process. So UX needs to be deeply embedded in creating the user stories that define the engineer's work in the sprint. So if you're an engineer, you're familiar with agile, you probably are. You're familiar with sprints. You're familiar with the sprint cycle. You got a user story. Theoretically, a user story is, as a user type, I need to do a thing so that I can whatever. That sounds very much like an outcome. That sounds very much like a non-process driven or non-functionally driven thing. It sounds like a problem to solve, right? But more often than not, user stories come in Jira or whatever thing that you're doing as build this thing, put this button here, and there's no context for what it is that we're doing. There's no understanding of what we're actually trying to do. So part of our job as UX design is not just creating the design, but also giving the context to the people who are executing the thing, so they understand why they're trying to build the thing, not just what they're trying to build. Rather than what we call throwing it over the wall. The idea that we're in cubicles and there's a partition, and the developers are on this side and the designers are on this side, and design's done with their spec and they toss it over the wall for the developers. There's got to be communication, collaboration. By the time a user story hits a sprint, it should not be the first time that a developer has put eyes on it. It should have been built in collaboration with UX and product management and developers. So what we're trying to do with UX is to craft the definition of done with outcomes to help give the engineer the context of the story. What we're looking for is the engineer to be able to solve problems, and we may have a really good idea of what that problem solution looks like. It's been tested, but it's been done in collaboration with the engineers. So even if the engineer who was involved in the testing and creation isn't the one who's implementing it, they have the context and they can go back to anybody who was involved in that and say, I'm not clear on this thing. What is it we're trying to do? Or I have another idea. Could we try this? Or would it make sense to do this other thing or do it this different way? And then when we set the outcomes as the definition of done, rather than, we've shipped the code, check, done, user story is done. Once we've measured it and seen how successful it is, then that story is actually done. So a story shouldn't be a 2-week sprint block thing. It should be an end-to-end, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we'll know when we're successful, and this is how we've measured it. And now we've measured it, and yes, we've been successful, or no, we've not, and we need to iterate on that. So that's how we know when we're done with a thing that we have executed. So UX outcomes and metrics. This is, turns out I know how to build a presentation nicely. Tom. This is from recent work that we've done with Jared Spool, who runs Center and an education, a UX education space, and somehow also branded Leaders of Awesomeness. I'm not really sure how all that branding fits together, but if you Google any of those things, you'll find Jared's and Center's work. So what we're looking for here is to start with an outcome in mind. If we're successful, how will our users' lives be better? We're not looking for a specific solution. We're talking about how we improve lives. We're not saying, hey, we're going to put a drop down here or a checkbox list. We're not making that decision. We're saying at the end of the day, our users' lives will be better because we've accomplished this outcome. And so we're going to set metrics for how to measure whether we've nailed it or not. And part of that process is saying we're going to shorten the time it takes to get a mortgage by 85% by putting all of that into one workflow online that you can do from your phone, right? So there we are. Here's a concrete measurement. It usually takes me 3 weeks to get a mortgage approved with all the document back and forth and faxing and emailing and whatever else needs to be done. We're going to get that down by 85% to I don't know what that actually works out to, 2 days, something like that. And then we can measure, are the users able to actually complete that task in 2 days? So an outcome is what we want our users to accomplish or feel when we've been successful, and a feature is one way we might get to that outcome. We instrument to measure the outcome. If we're not hitting that outcome, the feature wasn't successful, even if it shipped with no bugs. So when we change our definition of done to from it passes all unit tests, it didn't have any QA come back, and users are able to reach that thing with no 401 errors. We reduced the time it took to take the mortgage through the process to 2 days. That's an outcome that we can measure that is meaningful to our users. And we're looking for outcomes over features. Checking the box to say we shipped the feature is not the way to build a good product. So example, in our space, we have analysts, security analysts, and they spend lots of time tool switching. Right now, they need to go into like 2 or 3 different tools to identify the customer, the set of customers that we are looking to serve. They have to copy paste and run individual search queries against each of those customers to tell which customers have alerts, right? Not a good workflow at all. This is common in enterprise. Like, people have a job to do, they figure out how to do the job. And it's usually the most efficient way to do the job given the tools that they have. What we're looking for is to figure out what other tools they could use to improve their lives. And the outcome that we're looking for is to improve the life and efficiency of the analyst. So, and another one of the problems is that often multiple analysts end up tackling the same alert. So we've done discovery work around this, and we have listened to our customers, and they say this is a problem. We've kind of attacked that problem from a few different angles, and we've got really good confirmation through our research that this is the problem that we're trying to solve. So the outcome that we're looking for is kind of, okay, here's the problem, here's the other thing. We want them to be able to efficiently complete alert triage without needing to switch tools. And so they can clearly see what alerts are theirs and which ones belong to another analyst. That's a good outcome statement. We know what we're trying to accomplish there, and we can measure that using some metrics. So we know how long it takes for an analyst to triage alerts. We're going to cut that down by half. We know that our analysts often accidentally grab the same alert. 2 different analysts will be working on the same alert. Totally inefficient. We don't want that at all. So we're going to reduce that by 90%. And then our last metric is that our users are going to actually report greater satisfaction. So we've got two quantitative metrics. Sorry, quant and qual. Quantitative metrics of, okay, we've got numbers that we're measuring against, and then we've got a qualitative metric where users are going to report on a 7-point scale greater even though we're using numbers, we're treating that as a qualitative because we're measuring not user behavior but user sentiment, even though we've got numbers attached to it. And we're on a 7-point scale because 7-point scales are a little bit better than 5-point scales for this context. We can see better where things have improved. And the story isn't done until we've actually measured against our goals. So shipping the feature is not enough. Measuring against the goals for success to see if we need to go back and iterate is where we're actually done with that story. Questions on that stuff before we move into research frameworks?
How do you know that the outcomes you're setting are realistic?
A lot of times you don't. A lot of times it's throwing stuff at the wall. It's a hypothesis. and this is testable. So we can spitball, and we can also we hypothesize and say, all right, we think we can get this down below 50%, right, of the current time. Just looking at the workflow and hitting the stopwatch and going, okay, well that took 3 minutes, and really if we automated it should take 8 seconds, right? That's a good place to start. And then there are certain things that are really obviously a problem because the tool is not providing what is really readily accessible information. We know we can reduce analyst collision by 90% because all we have to do is set up a feature where if an analyst clicks on a thing, an alert, that alert is no longer available for other analysts to click on. It's not rocket science. Like that's a really easy, that's low hanging fruit, right? So if and then okay, maybe we try that and we test it out, and it turns out that people are still sometimes clicking. Maybe the alert has a banner at the top when you click into it that says this alert is being worked on by Bob. Now you've got a pretty good visibility that you're not the only person working on it. Bob claimed it first. Where it's really unlikely that they're going to click the same thing within the 300 milliseconds it takes to register that. And if it turns out that actually is still a problem, then we can go even further. But we're getting into like minimum viable product to product market fit to like further iteration of like how much value is there in solving this problem. If we know that a third of the time analysts have collision, and we can cut that down to 2% of the time, okay, that's still a measurable problem. 2% analyst collision when you're dealing with 1,000 alerts a day is still 20 alerts. How much extra time does that take? Is that a problem that we need to solve? Maybe it is. If we look at the business metrics on that of like how much time how much money is an analyst's time worth when they lose 5 minutes, and how much is their frustration and happiness worth? Is that a problem we're solving? We can answer those questions with the numbers and use the data to understand whether those things are worth solving. But yeah, it's hypothesis and testing. We think we can do it by this amount, and yeah, you sandbag it a little bit. You say, I think we can do it by 90%, so we're going to set our target at 80%. And then when we get 96%, hey, awesome, we pat ourselves on the back. But the point is that we're solving problems and we're setting measurable things. If we really only think that we can improve somebody's life by 5%, then we look at that and we say, is this problem really worth solving? Do we need to invest the resources in this? If that problem is worth $2 a day and we're gonna improve it by 5%, we're going to spend $1.90 on that problem a day. It's not a big problem and it's not a big savings. It's not a problem we're solving. On the other hand, if we think that we can reduce support tickets around this issue by 75% and each ticket costs $200 to solve in support person time, that adds up. And you can say over the course of 6 months, that problem is going to be worth X number of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Putting 2 design cycles and a developer cycle into it, that's a worthwhile problem to solve over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question in far more detail than? Okay, yeah. Cool.
A question I had when you were talking earlier about low fidelity prototypes, that wasn't your word, but that sort of general concept instead of like high fidelity buttons. And you said you're still working on tablets as your daily driver. What actual software are you using?
So I for the first year and change of my time at SecureWorks, I was mostly in a visual design role, and so I was in Figma all day, every day. Yeah, I actually got really good at Figma, and we're gonna demo, do a little quickie demo of Figma later on. That was my main work tool. Nowadays, I'm mostly writing specs and synthesizing research information. So I'm doing a lot of work in Miro, which we're also going to do a quick demo of.
So I think it's 10:39. Shall we get on with the research framework?
Let's do it.
Excellent,
Cool. So
thank
this
you.
was a graphic that one of my colleagues put together. He's a brilliant researcher. Actually lives here in the Valley. He was how I ended up with this job. He was the director of UX and hired me on, and has since become the director of UX research. We've split the UX team into research and product design. But he's kind of like top drawer UX designer, researcher, worked for some of the best folks in the business. And so he put together this framework document to help sort out the different types of research that you can do, when you would do them, whether they're more qualitative or more quantitative, and also how long they tend to take. So it's a bubble chart. So you can see here, the bigger bubbles take around 3 to 5 weeks. The medium bubbles take 1 to 2 weeks, and the small bubbles take 1 to 3 days. And then it sorts out goals and stages. So the stages are problem space, solution space, and track, measure, and learn. The goal for the problem space is to triangulate divergent ideas to identify and clarify user needs, behaviors, and perspectives. So really that's a lot of what we've been talking about so far. It's really understanding what the right thing to build is before we move on to building the thing right. So the different types of things that we want to do in this space are field studies. A field study is basically just what it sounds like. You go out into the field and you look at what people are doing. Ethnographic research falls into this. You go to a workplace and just watch people do stuff, and you treat it like an anthropology project. These people are doing this thing. Look at the office worker in the wild, and you look for inefficiencies, and you look for pain points where they're trying to accomplish their tasks. You look at their overall space. Like I can create software that when I'm sitting quietly at my desk works just fine. But if Alex, I'm gonna hopefully not trigger your PTSD here. But if I'm in an airplane and trying to fumble with an iPad to track my fuel mileage, that software may work differently in a different context if I've got a lot of background noise, a lot of cognitive load. There's a difference to the amount of stuff that I'm going to be able to process. So understanding the context of our users is really a good part of what a field study is about. Competitive analysis, seeing what everybody else is doing is really important. Has somebody else solved this problem already? Has the way somebody else solved this problem, is the way somebody else solved this problem actually good, or could we make it better? What are the common patterns in this space? Is there a common language? User interviews. Just sitting down one-on-one with a user and talking to them about what they need. Often, you have very pointed questions about what they're looking for, or sometimes it's more general, where you're looking to build a persona or a journey map. Sales feedback is invaluable. Like I think that's something that often gets ignored. The salespeople are often the folks that are closest to users, because they're out there every day, and their job is or their paycheck is based on how much stuff they sell. So it's really important for them to understand their users, and they'll know exactly how to solve a problem, because a user will say, "Hey, can you do this?" And they'll figure out somehow to do it in your software. And it may be the least efficient workflow that you've ever seen, but it's the only way to get it done. It's the most efficient workflow that is successful. So that's a really good opportunity for finding problem spaces. Hey, this thing that really should only take 3 steps takes 42 steps. Believe me, the salesperson is going to have heard about it, and they will have walked people through doing it enough times that they're a good proxy for that pain. Analytics deep dive, that's in the quantitative space rather than the qualitative space. But if you've got enough users in your system, you can start to look at what their user paths are, what their pain points are. This is how the science of shopping carts came to be. where you go into analytics and you look at where the drop-off points. This was like, optimization 101, or has become optimization 101. 20 years ago, this was a new field. But going into your analytics is a really great place to start to understand what people are doing, and then you go into the qualitative space to understand why they're doing it. You might go and do a user interview or talk to a salesperson to understand, hey, this feature, we're seeing some weird things in the data analytics. Sales guys, what do you know about this feature? And they'll say, oh, let me tell you about that feature and all the complaints that I hear about that. So that qualitative is a really good starting point for framing your problems. And there are two areas that you can go to. One of the terms that I learned just over a workshop that I was doing in the past few days is data spelunking, cave exploring. So just getting your data people, and if you are in an enterprise space, you have data people, getting your data people to go in and start digging through the analytics to look at what people are doing and just see if they're like, huh, that's weird. And you can start behavior that we're seeing or the behavior that we want isn't being borne out in the analytics. What's going on there? And that's where you get into user interviews, or I actually don't even know what a diary study is. I think that might be asking users to keep a diary of their work and then studying the diary. I'm not familiar with that research methodology. But yeah, it allows you to take the next steps. And then the other one is, I have a hunch that this thing is happening, or I have heard this. Let me corroborate that against the data. And so if you hear from one really upset customer, hey, I can't do the thing, you go back and you look and you see 500 other users all successfully doing the thing. You go, maybe the problem isn't the thing. Maybe the problem is you, bud. And that's when you say, that's not a problem that we're going to solve right now because you're the only one having that problem. As we move further along the stages, our solution space is where we start to decide. Okay, we understand the problem. What is the solution? What is the thing that we're trying to make? And card sorting, you can see, just barely overlaps into that solution space. Card sorting is an information architecture technique where we prioritize information and group information. Here are the 50 different things that we know that we're doing, that our users are trying to do. How do we group those so that we can organize menus efficiently, so that we can organize pages efficiently? How do we group information, and how do we prioritize that information? Here's a logical group of information. Now, which is the most important? Which has to go to the top position of the menu? Which has to be the primary action button, et cetera, et cetera. Tree testing. This is once we've got our organization structure, we put it in a tree and we say, hey, does this make sense? Does this workflow make sense? Does this information architecture make sense? We put something in front of the user as here's the thing that we're proposing in a very abstract form, not wireframes or prototypes, but like, here's boxes and arrows of what you're trying to do, or how you're sorting your information. Does that work for you? Does that make sense? And that's super cheap, super easy, really easy artifacts to produce for that. Really easy to just put something in front of somebody and get yes, no, or I think this is more important than that. Surveys are another good one. We have an idea that this solution might work. Put it out there to 200 users and say, hey, take our survey. Is this a problem? Is this a viable solution? You self-select out if you say, no, this isn't a problem for me. So you remove those survey results, and then you look at the people who say, yes, this is a problem, and yes, that's a viable solution, or no, that's totally not. That makes no sense whatsoever. So you use your survey, again, relatively cheap to implement, to get good data about whether your solution is going to work. More expensive, more challenging, iterative UX testing. That's where we start to get into wireframes, where we start to get into prototypes, or more well-defined screens. and sit down with a UX with a user and walk through it with them and see if they are able to do the tasks that you're proposing that you're trying to do. See if they have insights. But creating a prototype might take a day or two, whereas for a UX designer, whereas building that actual feature might take 2 weeks or 2 sprints, plus all the release and instrumenting and QA and all that stuff. So it's a much cheaper way, even though from our perspective as UX designers, it's one of the more expensive things that we can do. It's actually, in the grand scheme of things, super cheap for the organization. I don't know what summative UX testing is. I'm not familiar with that term. I got to ask Sandy what that is. I think just based on its position in the space here, in the stage and goals, that it's probably like, we're pretty sure that this is the solution. Let's get it out in front of users one more time. But don't quote me on that. Take that with a grain of salt. That might be completely wrong. So now we're into the delivery space. This is we're really getting to the point where we're implementing something or getting very close to implementing something. We want to be sure that the launch part of it is going to be successful. Now, there's a mentality, especially among the more agile-minded folks of, just ship it and then we'll iterate. There are problems with that. There's the risks associated with shipping something and iterating on it are not great or not huge in the engineering space, but are quite big for the brand. When you ship something that's mediocre, it tells your users that you actually don't understand their problems. It tells their users that you don't actually care about their workflow, and they lose trust. If something is buggy, or if it doesn't actually solve their workflow, if they go, "This is stupid. Why didn't you just do it this way?" If you haven't heard that customer say that, you missed out on an opportunity, on a research opportunity. You should hear that long before it ever gets launched as a final thing. This is one of the places where A/B testing is. You've got two solutions that you think might solve the problem, or two nuances to a solution that might solve the problem. You get out there and you test both of them. You put version A in front of one audience and version B in front of another audience, and see if they are one performs better than the other. And A/B testing is there's a lot of nuance to A/B testing where you can put one solution up and another solution up, and those two things are vastly different. If you A/B test them, you can easily see one solution is better than the other, or there's not a significant difference. But you have to get pretty scientific and control variables if you want to understand really why one solution is better than the other. And then it gets into iterative testing, like, okay, what exactly is it that is causing the difference here? One of the things that I saw in a Nielsen Norman Group workshop that we did a month or so ago was two very different landing pages that were being A/B tested, and there was a difference in the photograph that was used. There was a difference in the layout. There was a difference in the placement of the calls to action. There was a difference in the language. So that's 4 variables, and they just compared version A against version B. So there's no way. Yes, you might get some data about version A works better than version B or vice versa, but there's no data about which of those variables actually mattered. So if you wanted to be really scientific about it in your A/B testing, you really need to say, I'm going to use the exact same thing with just a different background picture, or I'm going to use the exact same thing with just different copy. I was lucky enough early in my career to and I say lucky kind of loosely, but it actually was a really valuable experience for me to work at a design studio that did subscription cards for Sports Illustrated and a few other really big mainstream magazines. And on a production level, it was the worst thing in the world, because it's like you have to use the absolute brightest colors, and you have to use the exact type specifications, and there was very, very little room for anything. But when you look at it, and this is one of the things that I learned about marketing, we had heard in design school, marketing people are terrible. They're always going to tell you to do your design stuff, different. You may have the most beautiful design, and the marketing people will tell you it's terrible. But the marketing people were really on to what small things can we change to increase our numbers? What things can we do? And it helped me really focus on the science of design and how we can really hone in on what makes a design successful. And so little things like, okay, we've got this card, and here it says, 33% off, and this other version says save 1/3, and this other version says 67% lower, or whatever the variations are. And it was all just language numbers or language change, little language changes that they used to test to see what the difference in variance was, and being able to say you get a better response if you say 33% off than if you say 1/3 off or something like that. Actually, it makes a difference. So yeah, anyway, I kind of rabbit holed on A/B testing there. That's a thing. But that's when we're getting into the right before launch, we've got a pretty good idea what our solution is, and we want to test out some nuances. And then getting into track, measure, and learn. This is after we launched. It's too late to make changes before, to the thing once you've launched it. It's too late to make changes before you launch after you've launched. So what do we do there? We track, measure, and learn. Mistakes get made. Things happen, and we always want to improve on whatever we've done. So getting into that space of, how do we gather information about that? Sales feedback, again, super fast. Like you launch something, and our sales engineers and our customer support folks are going to know, our customer success folks are going to know about it if that feature really fell flat. They're going to hear about it pretty quickly, and we'll be able to get feedback from them on that. That's a small, fast, easy way to get feedback. Customer requests, that's in the qualitative. If customers are coming in and saying, hey, I just used this feature and it's great, I need 10 more of it. Can you also put this in this other section? That's a good indicator. Or, oh my God, can we please go back to the old way? It was so much better. That's another piece of information that you can gather. Monthly analytics reporting, you can see whether the feature has gained engagement. You can look at how the users are engaging and see basically the same stuff that I was talking about in the analytics deep dive early on the far other end of the spectrum. You should be doing that to see what the changes were, and we should have already instrumented to track what the metrics are that we're using to qualify success. So we should be looking at those analytics and saying, hey, do the analytics match up with what we were expecting? And then UX measurement, some of that can be qualitative, some of it can be quantitative, but really going back in and taking the time to look at how users are using things, surveying for satisfaction, sitting down with a user and having them go through the workflow and actually say, yeah, this is actually making my life way better, or yeah, it's better, I guess. It's but whatever. Or no, this is worse. Undo that, please. Doing that workflow at the tail end is just as important as doing it at the front end, because then we actually know whether we've been successful. And part of the challenge around UX in an enterprise space is proving that you're worth your paycheck. So what gets measured is really how we prove our worth. This project went through, it didn't have UX involvement, and it was terrible. And this project went through, and here's all the glowing quotes about how great it was. So I just covered a really broad swath of stuff at a fairly high level. Questions on that or any of that? I will take silence as I know, but Claire looks like she's typing. All right, I'm going to move on. So, Alex, you asked about my tool stack. Figma is the main design software that I use, but there's a lot of other tools that I touch in my day, every day. At the top, Google Docs and Sheets and Google Slides are a main one. When I need a scratch pad to just get stuff down, I just fire up a Google Doc and start writing. Google Sheets, that's where I'm going to start to document my findings and studies. I've got I think 8 or 9 spreadsheet. What is the proper term for the sub tabs of spreadsheets? Is it just sheets? Anyway, that for a user research project that I did last quarter, where it's like, okay, here's the list of all the users. Here's their LinkedIn profiles and scrapings off their LinkedIn profiles. Here's learnings that we got off the first set of interviews, et cetera, et cetera. For communications, we're a little bit spread all over the map. One part of the company uses Google Meets very extensively. Another part uses Microsoft Teams very extensively. And then randomly, people really like Zoom, so we still end up with Zoom. So I'm in one of 3 different video collaboration platforms for stuff. Teams that competes with Mattermost. Mattermost is like an open source Slack alternative. So these are my communications tools that I use to like talk with my team. That'll be any of these. Do interviews. That's usually going to be on Zoom or Microsoft Teams because the recording functions are best there. Yeah, and that's where I record. Miro, if you haven't seen it, is a kind of a whiteboarding tool for collaboration and visualization, and it is what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's many multiplayer collaborative thing. And when I first started using it, I was like, oh, this is a pain in the ass. It doesn't do it. I'm going to be designing things in Figma. I've already got my collaborative Figma space, and I can talk to people that I want to and look at stuff in Figma. It doesn't have all the keyboard shortcuts. I can't align stuff as easily as I want to. I hate this thing. But what it really is just kind of a simpler, lower tech version of something that's like a really fine design prototyping tool like Figma, and it's got a low enough barrier to entry that anybody can jump in, and it's basically a place where people can throw sticky notes around on a screen, and then later on I can go and sort those sticky notes, or I can build the artifact that I need for placing the sticky notes, and then when I want to collaborate with people, it's just real easy for them to take the sticky note tool and slap sticky notes all over the thing, or leave a comment on a thing. Yeah, so it's low barrier to entry, which makes it really good for collaborating with people who aren't designers. And then Jira and Confluence, part of the Atlassian suite for enterprise software. This is where we write user stories and tickets, bug reports, document stuff for the team. Confluence is like a wiki sort of thing. So it's content creation and management for other members of the team to consume. Yeah, and when I say I'm doing this thing, and this is I want everybody to know that this is the thing that I'm doing in my Scrum teams. That's where I drop a Jira ticket in, or if I find a bug, or if I'm asked to comment on a story, that's where Jira comes in. And then Figma is our screen and prototype design tool. I love Figma. I've become a power user in Figma. I'm really good with it. I'm really fast with it. But the fact of the matter is it's design software, and design software really hasn't changed all that much in the 25 years since I started working with Quark. You make a box, you put stuff in it. The major difference between Figma and Quark is that it's specialized for web design, so the measurements that you're getting are all based around pixels and stuff like that. and that it's collaborative. I have real-time collaboration with people, and the sharing functionality is super easy. I never have to worry about file management. It's just like, here is the thing. Anybody who goes in anybody who has permission can go in and mess with the thing. Cool. So we'll do a quick demo of Miro. I have asked my lovely assistant Claire to come in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Am I going to stop sharing my screen? How do I stop sharing my screen? Stop sharing. There we go. And then I will come back and share a different one. Oh, I might have not needed to stop sharing. Window. Yeah, okay, there we go. Cool. Do we see Miro up on the board? Great, cool. So if you guys are not familiar with user story mapping, this is a really useful artifact to produce and workspace to create for your team. Everybody knows what user stories are. A user story map helps to map out tasks and stories across different releases. So in this case, we've got our MVP release, and then multiple swim lanes there, where you have MVP version 1, version 2. Anyway, Claire, are you able to get access here? I'm not seeing you in here yet.
I believe I'm in there.
Well, let's try this. I'm going to there. You're in that one? Usually I would see an icon up here that says you're in.
Sorry, Tom, my sound keeps cutting out too. So if you
Okay.
need me, I can't always hear what you're saying right now.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Anyway, the idea that I'm trying to express here, I can get any number of, I mean, I suppose there's probably a limit in the number, but most of the time, as many people as I need to get in here and collaborate on this. So if I say, okay, we're going to have a new activity, which is going to be user sign up, and the task is going to be, I don't know, login screen, and the next task is going to be password reset. Right? So I can go and start creating stories. There's Claire. Perfect. Now I see you floating around. I can go in there and create stories around this. And then when Claire has questions, she can grab a sticky note and just drop it on there and ask her question. I'm going to say new story. User account. User.
Tom, as a bit of an aside, do you use user personas much?
Yes, I have mixed feelings about personas.
So do I.
I think that they are really, really useful for generating empathy across the organization. I think it's really useful for a lot of people in the organization who don't have direct contact with the customer to really start to understand who folks are, who the person that we're designing for is, and the fact that the person they think is our user is not always the person who's our user. So if we're designing a feature and Bob in marketing has somebody in mind, they're like, I don't understand this feature. The guy that I know of wouldn't use this feature at all. And you say, oh, actually, well, we have this other persona based on our user research that is a completely different person that you didn't even know was using our software. And that's who we're designing this feature for. And then the marketing person goes, oh, I didn't think about that. We should think about how we're marketing this based on based on X, Y, and Z, right? And then same thing with developers. Like developers often have a very myopic view of I am designing this feature. I have these specifications. The button goes here. The field goes there. Where when they have a better view of who the user is and what their goals are and what their cognitive load is, they can instead of saying I'm gonna do this to the spec, they can come in and say, okay, I understand why we're doing this, and if I have insight into other ways to do it, I can offer that insight. It gives them more context and more reason for what they're doing. Anyway, the short version of Miro isn't a user story mapping tool. It's not just for user story mapping. It's for all sorts of different things. You can drop sticky notes in here. You can build a table of stuff that you want to deal with. You can comment. There are lots of different things like mind maps, connective lines, et cetera, et cetera. The real thing is that I wanted to demo is the real-time collaboration here. So in a workshop environment where I might normally gather up 10 people in a room and get a whiteboard and sticky notes, we have roughly the here for remote users. I can start doing online workshops, and the barrier to entry on Miro is so low. A sticky note is so easy to grok that it makes it very quick to generate collaboration. And you do this obviously in the same way that we're doing right now, where we have a video call going on, and you can see people's mouse moving around the screen. Somebody can be like, as a user, I can what? This isn't finished. What is this about? And then we can have that conversation. So it creates a visual space for us to facilitate conversation in workshops. Questions on Miro? Cool.
No, we're good.
Sorry, do you use the app just out of curiosity, or do you use the web version?
I use the web version. I've never gotten around to downloading the app, and the web version has worked just fine for me. One thing that I've heard about the app is that it doesn't handle having multiple boards open well at the same time. And I think if you looked at my browser window on my work computer, I would say about 20 to 25% of the tabs that I have open are Miro boards.
So just to be clear, if anyone clicks on the link that you put in the chat, my sound cut out, so I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but if anyone clicks on the link that you put in the chat, then they actually land on this board and they can contribute themselves. Is that correct?
That is correct. Cool. At the very least, they can view and comment. I don't remember in my sharing settings if I said anyone with the link can view.
Right.
It doesn't look like I can set up comment and edit, so I'd have to actually invite somebody to the team to be able to edit.
Right. It's a little bit like Google Docs and the permissions.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
I can see us using this in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic tool for any kind of for a stand-in for any kind of used to be or wants to be a people in a room situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's how we've used it. We're as a completely remote team anyway. Having that is a really important part of the process, and it's really good for bringing people together. Cool. So did it switch back to presentation here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So next, quick Figma demo. Same deal. You can click on the link. I think I set that link to anybody can view. And this I do actually use the link. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And switch over to Figma. There we go. So like I was saying, Figma is very much a design tool like many others that you might have seen. Here's the graphic that I created for that slide earlier in the presentation. Here are two other graphics that I created for slides that you'll see later in the presentation. And I invited Claire into this quick mock-up that I did of some application that some of you may have heard of. There's not actually going to be a KiteStrings 2.0, but Claire, did you get access to that? Oh yeah, I see you. There you are. And just to double check, you guys do see my Figma screen? Cool. Okay, so Claire's in here. I can see where Claire is. Oh, Claire's on a different page. She's on the logo page.
I've gone rogue.
I clicked on that. That took me to where Claire's mouse was. Here's where I can do the boxes and arrows. Here's where we have actual screens for the application. If I were building a prototype, I might put that on a separate page. I haven't actually built a prototype there. But you can make clickable prototypes with Figma. There's a prototype tab over here. No, I know everything I need to know. Thank you, Figma. I appreciate that. Where I can start doing stuff where I say, okay, so there's my other frame. This is going to be home page. No, home page. The buttons I have here, dashboard, users. All right, so I've got 3 different pages here. I want to just really quickly say, design real quick. Landing page. Claire, would you mind copying landing page over to the dashboard and users pages and relabeling those so that we know what page we're working on when I do the prototype? Awesome. I'm going to move over into prototype view here, and I'm going to connect this button here to this page here. I'm going to connect this button here to this page here. Right?
It's amazing. There's no delay between what I'm doing and what you're doing.
Yeah, they've done a really good job of reducing latency. So I've got interaction details here, and I'm on the prototype thing where I'm connecting stuff, connecting wires, and Claire was on the design tab there. So she's doing moving stuff around, right? So we're collaboratively working on this project, at the same time, building stuff out. I'm gonna hit the prototype button here. And it's going to create a prototype for me here. There's a clickable button. I can go to the dashboard. I didn't actually wire up the other screen's stuff, so I'm going to just refresh. I can go to the users page. Bam, that was how fast it was to make a wired up prototype. And there's lots of nuance that you can create within that. It doesn't have to be really simple. I can actually create keyboard shortcuts. So if I wanted to, from the home page, I could go in and create an interaction. Click, instead of on click, I'm going to say on key. I'm going to say D is the keyboard shortcut to go to the dashboard. And then I'm going to create another interaction where I say the keyboard shortcut for users is U. So I got a key gamepad. U. And so that interaction is going to navigate to the user screen. And this interaction is going to navigate to the dashboard screen, right? So
Tom,
I go back. Yep.
where is this file actually saved?
In the cloud, magically.
And can you save a local copy?
You can, yes. So I can go.
So is there a way, if people that you're working with choose to download a local copy and work locally, is there some sort of version management, version control
So
system?
when you create a local copy, it's completely separate. There's no like branch merge workflow where I can take that stuff off. There is a version control built in here, so I can go back and say, where's version? Show version history. So yeah, here's our autosave versions. I can revert back to any of those. It's not Git-y. So there's a 30-day version history, right? And then I think that can go further if you have a paid version. And then you can also create named versions as you move forward.
Yeah, you can do iterations.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Very
Yep.
cool.
And then any changes that I make here are automatically reflected in the prototype now. So I can hit the D key, so there was no mouse interaction there. I can hit the U key, no mouse interaction. So the prototype time for real time. So if I'm in the middle of a test and I see a problem or I want to make a change, somebody says, I don't understand that. Well, what if it didn't say homepage? What if it said home? Or, what if it said, user settings or whatever change you want to make? You can actually do that in real time while somebody is working with the prototype. You say, hey, try navigating to that page now, and bam, you've got your change right in there. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Got that going for you.
Is there some sort of
Figma goes a lot.
Sorry, is there some sort of commenting feature?
Yes, there is. I don't know if you can comment in a oh, you can comment in a prototype.
Cool.
And let's see if that shows up in the design file. Yes, it does. There we go.
Nice.
So yeah, you can have people go through the prototype, and this is something that I just learned. Thanks for asking that, Claire. You can have people go through the prototype and comment on the prototype, and it'll show up in your thing. Now, really, if I were being smart about this, I would have copied my pages over to the prototypes page here, copied my screens over to the prototypes, and kept things separate. But for the purposes of my super fast sloppy demo, this serves the purpose. There's a lot more depth that you can get into here. Like if you look at our component library, a lot of the stuff that we've got are components that have been reused within that screen. So if I were to add another logo into here, or another icon, go back here. And I go back to my screen here. Bam, automatically updates. That's something anybody who's worked with any kind of symbol library software, enabled software, should be familiar with. And then there's a lot of different things that I can change. I can change the color of the instance. I can change the position or rotation or size of the instance. And then you can actually do variables within the thing. So I have a variable group here where I have the light theme and the dark theme version. So if I go back to my screens here, I click on that guy there. Property 1, it's the light theme. Oh, I didn't name that right. Let me go back. Property 1. I'm going to call this. I need the highest level. There we go. Property 1. theme. Great. So I go back to my screens. Here, I have that guy selected. There's my theme. It's light theme. I want the dark theme version of that. Okay, now it's the dark theme version. This works really well with stuff like button states. I've got 3 different versions of a button. I've got an extra small, a small, a medium, right? I've got a hover state. I've got a, whatever. And that you can actually get that level into the prototyping as well. So if I had hover states for these icons, I could add in an interaction. What was I in the prototype? I've got my click interaction, but I could also add in a hover interaction, right? While hovering, I could do some other thing. I could swap. Yeah, I don't remember the exact combination of interactions here to get stuff like hover states in there. But all that stuff can get quite complex. The things that you can't really do that I've seen are like enter text in text fields. I can have an interaction where I click and any key that I type will like kind of autocomplete a string of text, but that's really like faked out. I'm not actually actively typing, but many other interactions that I've tried to do, I've been able to fake out in Figma.
And so you can also save these components into the library and then share the library.
Yeah, exactly.
With other projects.
So right now, the way I've got this set up is all of these components are saved in this file, and I'm only using them within this file. But what I could do is I could go to my assets panel, and I could get an accessible library. Right now, I have another library that I have already subscribed to. Is that me who's having network stuff?
I think it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Am I? So I'm not sure.
Okay. Cool. Anyway, so I am subscribed to this library, right? And there's 17 colors in this library. So when I go to pick colors on a thing, now let me see. I want my I'm in prototype. That's why I'm not seeing it. So if I go in here and I want to choose my colors, I've got here, this is a color style. That circle indicates that it's a style, and I could choose from my existing styles there. And all of those styles come from an external library. Do I have that open? No, let me go to my, thank you. I know I haven't opened Figma on my home computer in a long, long time. That's okay.
Do you find Figma buggy at all? It's meant
Not
to be the
really.
best, isn't it?
Sorry?
Of like the Adobe XD, Sketch, Figma's meant to be the most robust one, I think.
Yeah, I haven't worked extensively with Sketch, very, very minimally, and I haven't worked with XD at all, so I don't really know how to compare them in terms of stability and bugs, but I know that a lot of teams are moving towards Figma. Figma has many of the features that most teams want, and they are doing a really good job of editing or of iterating and rolling out new features. Like when I switched roles from mostly visual design to mostly kind of earlier stage UX work about 5 months ago. In that time, they've already released a bunch of new features that I open up Figma and I'm like, oh, what's that? That's really cool. So I'm not working with Figma day to day the way I used to. And yeah, new stuff is rolling out on a pretty regular basis. The variance thing, where you have the variables that I was showing, that was new after I switched into this role and I got familiar with it. Yeah, they're constantly iterating on Figma and making it better. So I'm really impressed with the product. Cool. Questions on further questions on Figma? Sorry, you're on mute, Claire. Or maybe I'm not hearing you.
I think Claire's having some audio issues, but in the chat, Ashley Reed said that they're loving the demo of Figma. So and I think yeah, it's great. This is a really cool tool. Thanks for showing it to us, Tom.
Yeah, you bet. Let me just read through the chat here. Yeah, go by sketch. Yeah.
Jason seems to love it too.
Yeah. Honestly, like having used Sketch a little bit, it seemed like the prototype for Figma. I have really kind of fallen in love with Figma as a design tool, and I went really deep on it before moving into this newer role that I'm more in Miro and user interviews than I am in production. Yeah, I recommend it as a tool. I recommend it as a product generally because I think the product team is really good. I actually learned just yesterday that the team that built Dreamweaver for Adobe actually split in two, and the tech lead for Dreamweaver is actually the either CTO or somewhere very high up in the tech part of the Figma organization. So it's not surprising that they've got a really well-developed product product mindset. And then the other half of the team went on to go do Adobe XD. So yeah, cool. All right. If there are no further Figma specific questions, we'll hop back over to bring my screen share out there. In life. No, yes, that is what I want. Great. Cool. So as promised, we're now going to talk about what my day is. For any of you guys who are not American, which is probably almost all of you, or all of you, you may not be familiar with this GIF. Back in the 80s, I guess, there was a Dunkin' Donuts commercial where this guy, whose name I think was Al, got up at whatever ungodly o'clock in the morning to go and make the donuts, and it was time to make the donuts. I work 4 days a week, so I get I do 10-hour days, and my team is East Coast to West Coast. So I get up pretty early. I'm up at 5:01. That's when my alarm. I start my day at 6 a.m. And I work 6 to 4 days a week. So it's a 10-hour day. It's pretty intensive. By the end of the day, my brain is usually leaking out my ears. I picked 5:01 because if I snooze, I like 5:10 as my next alarm, better than 5:09. There's not really a lot of things that I'm nitpicky about, but like one of the things that I'm doing is trying to like really fine tune my brain and like how my brain interacts with my day to optimize my work, and that'll be a common theme that we pick up on a little bit more. One of the things, distributed team. The company is headquartered, and most of the sales team is on the East Coast in Atlanta. A lot of our development team is in Austin, so Central Time. No, they're Central Time, and then we have a few people who are in like the Chicago area, so also Central Time. We have a bunch of people in Colorado, so Mountain Time, and then me and a few other people are West Coast time. So really, the team is spread over all 4 time zones. We also have one part of the company that operates out of Romania, so trying to coordinate with them is really challenging. And then I've also started working with a customer in the Philippines, so trying to coordinate with them is pretty challenging. My day starts real early. Roll out of breakfast. Again, this gets into the biohacking. So I've started like monitoring my caffeine intake. So I've switched to tea in the morning, and I don't have sugar in my tea. Because of the ups and downs of sugar for a while, and I'm just going to say this. This is going into a lot more personal detail than you might expect from a day in the life of a UX designer. But when I'm doing UX research, I actually want to know about this stuff. I want to know what you ate for breakfast. I want to know, are you so aware of your daily rhythms that you're trying to fine tune? So this is kind of a somewhat tongue in cheek, but also like real version of what I want to know when I'm doing day in the life research. I want to know what what Twitter streams you're following. I want to, I don't want to know just what your tools are. I don't want to know just what your workflow is. I really want to know like where you're at in your day. What does your cognitive load look like? What does your, kind of biorhythm throughout the day look like? So I put this stuff in there. It's way more information than any of you guys probably want to know, but this is an example of the kinds of things that I want to know as a UX researcher. And some of the conversations that I'll get into, I'll like, just to do icebreakers, like, okay, so what do you eat for breakfast? Oh, you put cilantro, you actually, like, you take the time to chop fresh cilantro. That puts me in the mindset of the user. Okay, this person is focused on, their own nutrition, their own whatever. And as I do, 15 user interviews, I might gain a picture of like, okay, there's actually some really good consistency. These people are like highly focused on efficiency, and they're really going to value these efficiencies anywhere that they can get them. So it's not just me oversharing. There's a method to my madness here. My day starts at 6 a.m. ish. Depending on how good I am at actually getting out of bed after my first snooze, or even before my first snooze. Sometimes I'm not out of bed until 5:40, and my breakfast isn't done until 6:15. I don't have any meetings before 7 a.m. Not any regularly scheduled meetings. My my first hour of the day, I'm responding to any emails that have come in, because again, I'm dealing with customers that are in the Philippines, or coworkers that are in Romania, in our counter threat unit. Some of the people who are doing like the hardcore security research, right? So I'm responding to messages that have come in. I'm closing out any unfinished tasks from my previous day. I read, or if I don't have time, I pin articles from design, or about process design, or about any interesting thing that I'm continuing to learn about. And if I have a little bit of extra time, sometimes I'll try to cut down on my overusage of tabs in Chrome. The newer feature of tab groupings has rather than being a solution, has been an enabler to the problem. So I'm finding myself being more organized with the tabs that I have open, which enables me to have an even more excessive number of tabs open, which is, that's a problem. My first Scrum stand-up is with the core team at 7 a.m. So by 7 a.m., I'm already in the mindset of like, what am I doing today? What did I do yesterday? How am I reporting to my team? So if you're not familiar, Agile Scrum teams are small teams, and there's a ritual around standing up at the beginning of the day saying, hey, this is what I worked on yesterday. Here's where it's at. Here's what I'm working on today. I have these things that are blocking me, or keeping me from achieving these things. I have this thing that I need to talk about, so I'm gonna call a parking lot. So a parking lot is after everybody has done their little report in. We go back, and anybody who that topic is relevant to will stick around and have a conversation. But the idea is that it just gives everybody visibility into what everybody else is working on, and what problems they may be encountering, so that nobody ever is like sitting for 3 days waiting for something. The Scrum Master, who's one of the roles within a Scrum team, says, okay, that's a blocker. My job as the Scrum Master is to clear that blocker for you. Harass whoever it is who's not responding, or find out what the deal is about that thing, and then get back to you and get you unblocked, right? So there's Scrum rituals and roles there. This stand-up usually lasts around half an hour. Target size for a Scrum stand-up is 15 minutes. Our team is oversized. Scrum teams are sometimes referred to by Google as 2 pizza teams. You should be able to order two pizzas and feed your entire team for a work session, or whatever. So 10 to 12 people, 6 to 8 of them are developers, usually one designer, always one product manager, and some additional roles as needed. That could be a QA people. It can be data analysts for user data, data scientists if you're doing like hardcore data science products, machine learning or AI. But the core of the team is going to be your three amigos or your triad, which is the product manager, the tech lead, the UX designer, plus about 5 to 7 developers, because the tech lead is a developer as well, and then a few other folks. The team for core is over 20. So it makes those stand-ups a lot longer, and a lot of the stuff that some of the people are talking about have no application to what other the people are talking about. Core stands for Common Operations and Reliability Engineering. So the bulk of the team was actually originally referred to as DevOps, Development Operations. They're the people who are like, yeah, we're making sure that the AWS stuff is up and running, and we're setting up the Kubernetes infrastructure or the whatever backbone that we're dealing with. They're not necessarily a customer-facing product. They're just making sure that the customer-facing products can actually exist and function. And then because the kind of mandate of the core team was things that are common operations, user experience that was common across the application kind of got glommed onto that, even though the user experience is mostly front end and these were mostly back end people. So there's very little overlap between user experience and most of the team there, because basically it's like, oh, this thing is performing slow. That's the only thing that the user experience really factors in. Is it fast enough? So there's this weird schizophrenic nature of this core team right now, and part of the organizational change is like we're still kind of really getting our feet under us and understanding team's function and how to best optimize this. So that's again background of why things are the way they are, and this is common as a product organization develops. You start making teams, or you start making organizational structures, and then you have to finesse them, you have to iterate on them, so things change. So yeah, anyway, that's my first Scrum stand-up. Now I say first, normally you're supposed to be on only one team. We'll get to that in a minute. So between 7:30 and 8, I tackle a task, because I have a half-hour window between that and my next standing meeting. That's going to be some small task. I only have half an hour, so it can't be anything that really requires deep focus or head down time. I'll reach out to people I need to schedule time for that day. If I need a quick huddle, like, hey, I'm working on this thing, I have a quick question, that's one of the times that I reach out. The day that I tracked, I have a notebook full of notes of like, this was my day. My notes from that period say, meander through a teammate's work that she posted. So one of my teammates was like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Could anybody offer me feedback? So I poke around and say, okay, yeah, that looks this. Figma file, asynchronous, leave a comment, leave a couple comments, whatever. Reach out on chat, say, hey, I looked at your file. It looked really great. Or, hey, I have a question about this. Why did you do that, right? So, quickie interactions there. I'll send a follow-up email to an interview, interview subject from my previous day. Hey, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Your feedback is really valuable and is going to go to making our product better, yada, yada, yada. Add some notes to a doc that I'm working on. Whatever I can squeeze into that half hour before my second Scrum stand-up, because I'm also the UX designer for the search product team. It's not recommended for a designer to be spread across multiple teams. We have staffing issues. We don't have enough designers to cover all of our teams, so sometimes we're spread across multiple teams. It's really challenging. We're also experimenting with a pod structure where one of the problems that we identified early on with this empowered team structure is, okay, you're responsible for search, you're responsible for investigate, you're responsible for this other thing. That creates a silo where it's very difficult for us to create an end-to-end experience, because what the user is doing will often touch on a number of different, what we were referring to as products that are built around the engineering needs of that product, right? So what we've experimented with doing is partnering designers who have some sort of relation in their functional areas, so that there's at least some crossover in the discussions, and you can divide up work. Like if one designer is a really good researcher but doesn't have great visual design skills, or is just generally slow in Figma or something like that, the other person is more of a production designer and is learning research skills. That's a thing where you can kind of help each other out there. Or if one person is more senior and one person is more junior, there can be some mentorship there. So yeah, there's a bit of that structure. This team is also oversized. It's a 20+ person team. So again, stand-ups can go a little bit long. This one happens to be a little bit faster. And then here's where it gets funky. The rest of this day is much less structured or much less regular. I can't say every day I do this. Every day starts to look a little bit different. Every week looks a little bit different. Some weeks I'm booked, more than 60% of my week is booked for meetings. Those meetings can be information gathering, they can be critiques, or they can be the weekly or bi-weekly standing meetings that we have for our product teams or our UX team. There's standard sprint rituals of sprint planning, end of sprint work presentation, and retrospectives. Those happen every 2 weeks, and then the UX team meets every week. If I have a standing project that's ongoing, sometimes I'll have a weekly readout or a bi-weekly readout of what the progress report is. So I'm going to touch on the guild structure that we have, which is kind of a cross-stitching of functional areas as opposed to our empowered team. I kind of look at it as a weaving. So our empowered team structure is like, here's the search empowered team, here's the agents empowered team, here's the investigate empowered team, right? That's the functional user interface developer, front-end developer, back-end developer, user experience designer, product manager, and those go horizontally across all the teams. So every week we have a UX team meeting where we talk about things that are relevant to the UX team as a whole. Here are initiatives that we're launching into for the UX team. The design system cuts across all of our empowered teams. And then that allows us to continually at least have some level of awareness across the teams. But even that's not really enough to maintain good visibility. So we have another weekly check-in where two of the groups, what we refer to as the core functionality group that does investigation, detections, and automations of alert stuff. They're one group, and then the platform group, which is all the stuff that's happening kind of platform-wide, which is search, core, and reporting. That's happening in another group. So we meet and talk about work, present work, so that we have, again, cross-team visibility. So yeah, that's one of the meeting types that we have. And then research and discovery meetings are less regular. We don't have that. We don't have those things scheduled regularly. That's when, if I want to do something that involves, it's going to involve research and discovery. Any initiative that we have, I need to do research. I need to do discovery. I need to start gathering users or gathering stakeholders from within the organization. I'm going to get those salespeople together. I'm going to get product management together, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions and try to frame out the problems that we're working on, so that we've all got alignment on the problem that we're trying to solve. So that 6 weeks into a project, when I say, okay, here's the screens that we're working on, somebody doesn't come and say, that's not the user that I envisioned this for. And I can go back and say, no, we got alignment on this early. This project is focused on this user solving this problem. So yes, what you're saying may be a thing, but it's not the problem we're trying to solve right now. So it's building that alignment and then moving things forward. And then, a user testing session is going to happen. I might get an ad hoc group of designers together to say, hey, critique my stuff. What am I missing? What patterns do we already have in the app? What patterns are you guys familiar with from outside of the app that I'm missing? That's where that's where some of those ad hoc meetings happen. So right now, my pod partner is doing most of the production work on the current search initiatives. The main core project is huge and involves a ton of discovery work. So I'll have different levels of meetings that are happening across those initiatives. Yeah, that covers most of user testing sessions. That's a meeting, and then I need to find time to synthesize and read out those findings. Oh, production time. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, research production time. So a big part of my day that I'm always struggling to find time for between all the meetings that I have is to actually produce design artifacts. What you've heard me talk about for the last 2.5 hours or whatever it is a lot of research, discovery, talking to people, gathering needs, gathering requirements, yada, yada, yada. But then at some point I have to actually deliver something. I have to say, here's the thing. And that requires a lot of heads down time. It requires focus. And a lot of the weeks that I have, I'll have meetings booked and I'll have, half an hour or an hour between meetings. I've got to cram in lunch into that space sometime. I've got to take a coffee break. I've got to decompress and take notes on the meeting that I just had. It's actually really difficult to find, even in a 10-hour day, like a 2-hour block of focus time. Often I'll get to the end of my day or towards the end of my day, and that's when the meeting times wind down. And I'm just trying to take a breath and process everything that I've gathered at the beginning of the day. And that's also when people start reaching out to me and saying, hey, can I get a quick huddle on this thing that I'm working on? Or I heard you say this thing. Can we talk more about that? And trying to get that a 2-hour or 3-hour block of focus, go in and sort stuff and tag stuff and start creating tables of organized information around the stuff that I've learned is really difficult to come by. So let alone actually try to make a screen, right? So trying to get that time is the biggest thing. And this is across my team. I hear all of my team say the same thing. Oh my God, we're overloaded with meetings. Oh my God, I can't get focus time. So these are the things that I'm trying to do when I'm looking for that focus time. I know I have a workshop coming up, right? I need to build a Miro board with the structure that's going to facilitate that workshop. That's got things broken up into quadrants, or things, here's the, we're trying to prioritize. Here's the difficulty. Here's the impact. How am I going to build that, build that board so that we can place needs on an axis? How do I build the story map? How do I find the time to do all those things? So yeah, synthesis of research is another one. Scenario and workflow diagrams. I've gotten all this learning about this problem that I'm trying to solve. Now I need to actually diagram it out into a scenario so I can say, look, here's what we're trying to do, and here's where these things fit into this workflow. And then getting into actual mock-ups and prototypes, a screen so that people can offer feedback on placement of stuff, prototypes so that I can actually test it. Those all take substantial amounts of time to build out. Yeah, I'm a busy guy. Questions on any of that so far?
No, not on this specifically. Jason does have a question for the end, just about recommendations for UX books and blogs, but we can touch on that when we're finished.
I have a question about all that. It's kind of like a high-level question.
Yeah.
I'm back. I don't know if you
Yep.
can see. So hearing you describe all that and seeing the 60% plus meetings, I could feel my heart sort of sinking as getting mired down in all that. So I guess it's like a high level question. Is this a good system? Do you feel like this is a good system?
I can't remember who said it, but somebody said democracy is the worst system of government around, except for all the other systems. Is it good? Does it generate worker satisfaction? I would say no. I would say that it's not a system that makes me go, yeah, this is awesome. I want to spend my whole day doing this. No, honestly, I would rather sit around making screens all day. But this is the job. This is how you make a good product. And it's, you don't get paid. The garbage man doesn't get paid because he's like, yeah, I'm stoked about garbage. He gets paid because, somebody needs to take out the garbage and there's money on the table to do that. I know that a lot of these tasks are hard. I know that there's a lot of cognitive switching and cognitive load that I have to go through, but this is the job. My, designer that I used to work with, we talked about we were gonna switch up how the Figma design system worked, and it was going to involve having a lot of screens that needed their components to be reconnected to the main component, right? To the what used to be referred to as master components. So the instances would end up being detached, and you'd have to go in and do the production level work. And I was like, I want to avoid that. And he was like, dude, this is the job. Like, you make changes, and there's production work that has to happen, and it's tedious, and it's not the thing that you would want to be doing, but it's the job. It's part of what we do to do this. Solving the problems and getting the alignment and buy-in from the team is all part of the job. If I don't do those parts of the job where I frame out the problem well and I make sure that everybody who's involved in it has a clear understanding of what we're trying to do, it makes the job, the fun parts of the job later on much harder, because then I go in and I have made a bunch of things, and somebody who didn't get their voice heard early on in the project comes in and says, oh, that's not the thing at all. I need this other problem solved. But if I have done all this upfront work of meetings and whatnot, then I can come back and say, no, actually, this is the problem we're trying to solve. We validated it these 6 ways. You were invited to the 3 meetings that we had for validation, and you didn't show up for any of them. So if you have a different problem, that's fine. Stick that, that on a sticky note, and we'll get to that when it gets prioritized, right? So it's a way to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then the other parts of it are, yeah, I would love to just put my head down and make a bunch of cool shit. But if the rest of my team and the rest of the organization isn't aware of that, I'm heads down making cool shit. My partner is heads down making cool shit. Everybody on my UX team is heads down making cool shit. The developers are like, hey, I've got an idea. I'm going to make some cool shit. And then you come back together and there's 15 different versions of the same thing. And I'm only exaggerating a little bit. I think we had like 9 or 10 versions of the same thing in production because nobody was actually communicating and collaborating. So as tedious as those meetings can be, they're really necessary, and that's really part of the job of the enterprise level work, is making sure that everybody is communicating and collaborating effectively. So the fun part is poking around and pushing pixels. The challenging part, but the part that is necessary, is all the meetings to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Super interesting. That's why I'm here, to hear how the enterprise works.
There we go. So
thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Other questions? Okay. It's the rule of thumb that I learned is count to 6. That gives everybody enough time to find their mute button if they have further questions. So I count to 6. Cool. So I talked a little bit about biohacking earlier, and this is part of my day, and part of the remote work and the 10-hour day, 4 days a week thing, is really trying to understand my own efficiency, and making sure that I can actually work effectively. I made a move to move into this space, and I'm really glad that I did. I love my previous work, but this was a new challenge that I really wanted to get into. Cybersecurity was my space, and I really I am personally motivated to be able to produce work well. So, I'm trying to maintain my energy level through a 10-hour day. That's challenging. Like, siesta's a real thing. Like, after lunch, like sleepy time is a real thing. So another piece of that is, I can muddle my way through my meetings on adrenaline. Like if I'm engaged in a meeting and I'm like talking to people and like, trying to pass stuff back and forth and really solving a problem, that keeps me engaged. When I hit the end of that meeting and like engagement, I'm often like, oh, okay. If I don't have good energy, just like generally in my body at that stage, I crash hard and I can't process and I can't actually do the work. And if I have a 2-hour block, that's gold. And if I lose a big chunk of that 2-hour block because I can't focus, it might be another 2 or 3 days before I have another opportunity to get that kind of focus time in. So I really need to know that the work, the time that I have allocated is able to be efficiently used. Back when I was working for myself, I was the boss. I could say, yeah, if that doesn't get done, well, I'm just going to do it tomorrow or the day after, and everybody just had to suck it up if I wasn't delivering, right? And that happened. Like I was not taking good care of myself on a regular basis. I wasn't sleeping well. I was staying up too late, and I didn't have the accountability that I have working on a bigger team. Because I could just put it off, or I could just put my head down, or I could close my door and take a nap. And if I wasn't efficient, it had impact, but it didn't have as direct impact on me because the buck stopped at me. Now I have accountability to the rest of my team, and I need to make sure that the wheels keep moving. And I want to make sure that the wheels keep moving because I feel really good about the stuff that I'm creating. Like cybersecurity is a really cool space conceptually, and then it's also actually really important. Like the East Coast pipeline just got shut down. Like I'm hearing more about this, and my work actually matters to me now because I see real world implications of the stuff that I'm doing. So yeah, I'm motivated to make sure that my day is right. When am I having that cup of coffee? If I have it in the morning, then I get a caffeine spike and I lose steam. If I have it in the afternoon, though, that counteracts the post-lunch sleepies, and I can actually get productivity through the end of my day. I might still crash in the evening, but that's not the end of the world. So that's a piece of my mental mental routine is like paying attention to what I'm doing, collecting data, and paying attention to my meals. Anyway, I'm not gonna go on for ever. I've also gotten really good at the 15-minute power nap. I'm a big fan. Yeah, and then another piece of the like mental picture of what my world looks like is the cognitive load of how much stuff I'm working on. I know for myself, one of the things that motivates me is I want to learn everything. I want to learn everything that I can about the space that I'm working in. I want to learn everything, that I can about the jobs of the other people in the organization, so that I can effectively communicate with my product managers and know what it is that they're going after, so that I can effectively communicate with my developers and have a really good rapport and not have to ask stupid questions of the developers every time. I as a former developer, mediocre developer, I have enough knowledge to be able to ask good questions to the developers and be able to take that back to my designs, to make sure that I'm not designing something that's not going to be performant or not going to be technically feasible. And so I want to just sponge and absorb as much as I can. I also, when I'm offered a new thing or when a new thing comes up, I'm always really excited, not always, usually really excited to be like, oh yeah, I want to dig into that thing. I want to say, yes, it's an interesting challenge, because there's no shortage of interesting challenges across my organization. So that leaves me vulnerable to taking on too much and overloading myself. So this is something that I've had to learn about myself and the opportunities that are available. I need to stay, too much. I've got too much on my plate, or I need help, or how do I distribute this? Yeah, and like I was saying, as a former entrepreneur, my go-to place is to just like chase down everything I need to learn. And one of the benefits of being on the team that I'm on is having a lot of other really smart people in the room to be able to say, okay, you got this. I don't need to know everything about this. I can just ask you the questions that I need to know, and I know that you're really smart and will explain it to me, and I'm smart enough to be able to understand enough to be able to do my job about it. What do we got? We're coming. We got 25 minutes left. So again, this is one of those UX things. If you were building a Tom persona, my top motivators here. Yeah, I'm just constantly amazed at how many smart people are in one company. It helps that the industry that I'm in is really high tech and really requires the best and the brightest. Like there are so many people in my company that were like high level in like NSA or people from the CIA who are doing analyst work, people who were former military doing analyst work, people who have worked in huge tech companies doing security work. I'm just constantly amazed by the smart people that I'm working with. It used to be that I would walk into a room and I would at least in my domain of expertise be the smartest person in the room and trying to like dole out the knowledge. Now I'm just like absorb because I'm usually on the lower half of the curve of smartest people in the room. I get to solve design challenges that nobody's ever solved before. I get to break new ground. That's really exciting for me. The challenges that I'm facing are really different from anything that I've done before. And I'm constantly researching and learning new things all day, every day. It's just like a constant stream of new cool stuff. My top daily frustrations. Oh my God, how can I get anything done with all these meetings? I'm not gonna go any further on that one. Another one is the like, who approved that? How in the world did that make it into production? So our design team historically has been understaffed. Our design has been developer driven. People say, this is a cool thing. I'm going to make that thing. I have no idea. I haven't talked to any customers, but I think this is going to solve the problem and it's going to make life easier. So I'm just going to make that thing. I'm not really know how any other people have done it, and I'm going to do it better, but I'm not going to actually help anybody else reuse that thing. So we have a lot of stuff in our application that just breaks convention. We have a lot of places where there should be conventions that there aren't. That's super frustrating. And then the other thing is, there are some people on the team who are not prioritizing communication with me around the things that I need as highly as I would like them to. And I will often send messages out into the ether, and that's a frustration. That brings us to the end of our slide deck. I also had wanted to talk about design systems, and I think that we have, am I right that we still have 23 minutes?
Yeah, I think we can go to 12:30.
Okay.
I did have, how about we address Jason's question though about, do you have any recommendations for UX books or blogs or Medium authors or podcasts? And actually,
Yeah,
Megan was also wondering about podcasts because she's really enjoyed listening in this morning, and it'd be nice if we could do something like this on a regular basis, but we need to know who to listen to.
Yeah, so Jared Spool is my go-to for content. He and Leslie, I can't remember her name. Jared Spool is a really easy name to remember, and Leslie something hyphenated is his partner at Center. They're the ones who are creating the most content that I have seen. I don't think it's podcasty in the way that I traditionally think of as podcasts, but the content is all really top notch. You can sign up for their newsletter and you get access to some of their videos, and they use that as a loss leader for getting in and doing consulting work with big companies. So that's one. Lean UX is a book that I really like. this guy here.
Mm-hmm.
There's one that's not like a super like highly regarded high level one, but I think is extraordinarily valuable. 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People. Susan M. Weinschenk, and I'll put this bibliography at the tail end of this deck and share it out, so you don't need to take notes. Yeah, it's a page by page, like one thing on each page that helps you understand the psychology behind design, like opening up to a random page. People read faster with a longer line length, but they prefer a shorter line length. Interesting thing. And there's a page about like, here's the research behind that thing. Here's an example. And it's broken down just like, 1 to 2 pages per idea, and then high level takeaways for that. Super valuable, really helps just like nail down some of the easy basic UX questions that people get wrong on a regular basis. What else have I got? There's a book that Sandy gave me. Where is it? It's one of a list apart books, a book apart. It's about research methodology, and it's not here. I'll add that to the list. And then I honestly really enjoy product books as much as I enjoy UX books, and that may be because I already have such a background with this stuff that's not where I'm going. Yeah, I wish I could say I read more UX books, but I really don't. I end up kind of just going with what I already know and reading a lot of Medium posts.
Mm-hmm.
Am I frozen or are you frozen?
I'm not sure. It says I'm resolving network issues.
Okay.
I'm a huge Medium fan too.
Yeah, so there's a few design space. I honestly just started reading design blogs and signing up for the Medium thing and say, check the boxes for send me design content. And I think their algorithm just like, knows to send me that stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of Medium articles. There's not anybody that jumps out at me that I really like follow actively. That is pretty basic, but that some of it goes actually quite deep. Talking a little bit about design systems, unfortunately, I don't have examples, so I don't have a slide put together for this, so I'm going to talk to the idea. 5 years ago, you could easily have been forgiven if you thought that a design system was a collection of components in a sketch file. In the last several years, that idea has changed and evolved quite a bit, where a design system is no longer just like, hey, here's your components, here's your Lego pieces to build your design. It's really it's extended beyond that to incorporate a much broader range of patterns, and it also is extended out into the development world, especially with a tool called Storybook, where the code snippets and the way and the examples in live code are as important, if not more important, than the design files that the designers work with. I think that there's for designers especially, there's a tendency to think of, because it says design system and that design word is in there, to think that it's for us. And really, we're a small part of the audience. The design system is really for everybody who's to be able to, it's largely for everybody who's not a designer to be able to reference how to do things correctly. So you can put together mock-ups in Figma or whatever your design tool of choice is, but unless the developers understand the context of how those things exist, and the fact that they're not just a one-off thing that they have to code individually each time, there's going to be a lot of missteps. There's going to be a lot of repeated work. So the idea of a design system is about understanding the patterns within your application or your whatever it is you're making, and making sure that you're not repeating yourself and not repeating work and not solving the same problems over and over again. So buttons are a really great foundational example, but they're really only the tip of the iceberg. Like, how many different kinds of buttons? Any article that you read about design systems will often start with, we had 47 different kinds of buttons. How many different kinds of buttons do you actually need? Probably not 47. There are good reasons to break out of convention sometimes, but understanding when you're breaking out of convention and why you're breaking out of convention is another piece of it. So if the design system says, we have these buttons for these uses, here you go, that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only ways you can use buttons, but they are the most common ways. And if you're not doing something that's intentionally different from those, use those buttons. They're there for a reason. They're there to help build consistency within the application. So when you have a primary and a set of primary primary button and a set of secondary buttons, you're not having to make a decision about what versions of the buttons you're using each time. Those decisions are already made. You just go primary, secondary, 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 right? Or primary, tertiary, tertiary, tertiary. Whatever the rules are, those decisions have already been made, so you can go on to make smarter decisions. Where that ladders up to is that's what we refer to as like the molecular level. If you look at Brad, that's not Brad Feld, that's a different Brad. I can't remember which of the Brads it is.
Brad Frost.
Yes, Brad Frost. Thank you. Terrible with names. It's one of the reasons I also don't cite books, because most of the time I can't remember the name of the book or who wrote it. That book by that person. Yeah. So how that ladders up is we have atomic stuff, which is like, here are your colors, here are your type styles, here are the absolute most basic foundational levels of what you're doing. You're not going to pick a new typeface for every page. You've got that stuff nailed down at the atomic level of your design system. Moving up to the molecular level, how does a color and a piece of typography and the set of corner shapes converge into a button? That's a molecule, right? So molecules are made up of atoms, and then you don't have buttons in isolation. Your buttons are going to be in conjunction with something else. So a modal or a form or something like that. How do those buttons exist in context of a form or in context of a modal? Where are they placed? How many buttons do you use? Do you need 15 different buttons? If you have 15 different buttons, you're probably using the wrong pattern. What you really want is a drop-down menu to select which button you're going to push. Select one of those 15 things, confirm it with a button. Yep, that's the thing that I want. Or select things and have that autocomplete. Oh, autocomplete, is that a thing? Do I actually need to press the save button, or does that automatically, not autocomplete, auto save? Does choosing that drop down automatically save that to the thing? Well, that's a pattern that we have to investigate. That's not actually a screen. I'm not going to make a component of that in Figma. That's a conceptual pattern of, in this context, we don't need to confirm this thing. We are going to choose that drop down. Once we've chosen that drop down, that is saved in the system. Do we want that? Do we want that in every context? These are the kinds of decisions that we need to make. What context do we use that autosave functionality, and what context do we say, no, we actually need somebody to go through this and confirm what they're doing before they okay it, and then we save it. Why do we do that in some cases? Why do we not do it in other cases? Your app, I don't know, but that's what our design system is supposed to answer, so that we don't have to have that conversation every time. Going through, you can kind of find the variables of what am I trying to do here? Am I trying to change the title of a thing? You know what? I know that when I hit the return key on that it's gonna save, and it's not a critical piece of information. I don't need a confirmation. I don't need a dialogue or a modal or something like that to change a title on a thing most of the time. On the other hand, if I'm going to do destructive actions in my application, if I'm about to delete a user, maybe that's a thing that I don't want to just like auto do. Maybe I want a confirmation. That's a pattern where we can say, if you are doing this, if it is a destructive action, take these steps, introduce a confirmation dialog, or whatever the steps are. Those patterns exist out in the wild. We can leverage them, and we can actually create a decision tree of, if you're doing this, do that. If you're doing this other thing, do that. If you're doing this, do that, but there are 3 options of that. So what are the 3 reasons you might use these 3 patterns? So that's really where your design systems come into play, and that accelerates velocity because we allow ourselves to have decisions already made for us. And this goes into that speed versus artifact creation thing. If we find ourselves losing speed, having these discussions over and over again, create the artifact. The artifact is an entry in the design system. Take the time so that you spend 2 days documenting this thing so that the rest of your company doesn't have to spend 2 hours debating it 400 times. Right. So design systems. One of the pitfalls that our company fell into was we wanted to create a design system, and there was only me staffed to handle that. I talked with my manager. We said, okay, the most important thing to put first in this process is build out the component library. Just get the base components, give them to the designers to use. Turned out the designers didn't really need most of that stuff as much as we thought they did. They were perfectly happy to create their own stuff, so they didn't really want to leverage the stuff that was in the design system. It took effort to get people to say, or to get people to actually subscribe to the button component when it's actually really easy for them to just draw a rectangle and stick some type in it. So there was extra effort to get people to use the thing. Then the organization process of like, where is this thing? I would have organized it this way. You organized it that way. I can't find anything. I'm not going to use this design system. So there was resistance to getting into the design system because of people's preconceived cognitive ideas of how it should be organized. If you asked 20 people, 10 people would say it should be organized this way. The other, another 8 would say it should be organized this way, and 2 people would say it should be organized that way. Well, yeah, 10 versus 8, we'll go with the 10 people. 10 versus 2, we'll go with the 10 people. Still, half the people don't like the way it's organized, and like, I don't want to use that. So getting buy-in from the designers was a part of that that we kind of skipped over. People didn't say, come to terms with the idea that it's not necessarily going to be exactly the way I like it, but I'm still going to use it anyway. So there was that part of it. So building a design system for designers is hard. Then there were the developers, and the developers wanted completely different questions answered. They wanted to know what the right set of buttons were to use. I couldn't even get components that the designers could agree on built out, or even colors that the designers could agree on built out to be able to clear the way to answer some of the developer questions. I could take a scattershot approach and say, look, there's 40 developers asking this question. I'm just going to answer the question. And then I've got a bunch of designers saying, why did we answer the question that way? I wasn't consulted on that. I don't think that's the way we should do it. So a design system is, in fact, its own product. And you need to do all the same levels of product discovery, product validation, et cetera, to implement a design system. And one person isn't enough to do that. If you read all the blogs about design systems, they'll say the same thing. And it took a good year of one person, mostly one contractor, helping for a few months to finally get to the point where A, I was sick of it and I asked to be moved to UX, and also B, we hired a design system manager, a designer to work on the design system, and 4 contractors to build it out so that the initial heavy lift of the design system could be done, and then we would have a couple of people managing it. That's just the design side. That doesn't even get into the code side. So yeah, that's my spiel on design systems. 3 minutes for questions. Go.
Is your design system a microsite?
No, not yet. Our design system currently exists as a bunch of Figma design libraries or asset libraries with documentation built into that. We do have a storybook instance that's up and running that you can go to see what's there, but they haven't been merged in any reasonable way. But yes, eventually, the idea is that storybook will reference the Figma files. There'll be an embedded iframe where the code snippet also has the design file referenced, and you can look, do visual QA between the component, the code component, and the Figma component. You can read about all the stuff that you need, all the documentation around the component, whatever the variables are that go along with it. There'll be sections on typography and color and yada yada yada. Yeah.
Tools like design systems can be hugely valuable, but there's always this balance between effort and reward, and how big does a team have to be before you actually need that tool?
Yeah. I think the answer is any size team benefits from systematizing design. Even if it's only, I have these really reusable components, and here's why I'm using them, and here's the documentation around it. If for no other reason, then it's great. Even if you're a solo designer, if you get hit by a bus, they're going to have to fill your shoes with somebody else, and having some level of continuity is really important. Trying to convince management of that is a challenge until such time as they have gone through that problem. Once they've gone through that problem, they're like, oh, you need to document everything. By the way, you also still need to do everything else you have to do just as fast, but you need to document everything. So in case you quit, we fire you, or something terrible happens, we're completely covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, I guess the complexity of the design system itself can be tailored to the scenario. Yeah,
exactly. If you're a small startup, a component library and a few code snippets might be enough. If you're Google or IBM, an entire ecosystem, multi-version ecosystem might be more what you need. If you're SecureWorks, somewhere in between.
Well, Tom, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. And I can see that you're passionate about UX, and it's completely infectious. I could listen to you all day long, but we don't have all day long, and it's 12:30 now. I'm just going to check the chat. Ashley. Ashley, would you like to speak up? Would you like to unmute your microphone? Ashley Reed? If not, then I can read out what you said. Here we go.
Yeah, I was just listening as someone who works as a business analyst, and I just wanted to say thanks for the fascinating glimpse into your workflows. It was really interesting to see how similar some of our tasks and activities are at the start of projects.
Yeah, I have immense respect for business analysts. One of some former colleague who also lives in the Valley started her career as a business analyst. She has become a fantastic UX designer, and a lot of the analytical mindset is very similar. I actually spent some time going into the BABOK, Business Analyst Body of Knowledge. It's a massive tome of all the processes around business analysis. So yeah, awesome. Glad to see somebody who's in the BA world. Solidarity.
Yeah, thank you for this.
For sure. Anything else before we wrap it?
No, Jason has shared an example of an atomic library.
Cool.
For everyone
Does this chat log persist? Is that something that we want to?
I don't think it does end up in the recording. Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't end up in the recording. So it would be great to have a library of links at the end. I can put together many of them. There was one book that you mentioned that I didn't quite catch.
It's probably the one that I didn't know the name of.
You held
So
it up and it
there's a
had dots on the
download
cover.
chat. There's a kebab menu with exactly one item in it called download chat next to the type your message.
That's the one.
There's my UX
A menu you
critique.
have to discover for one function.
Exactly. So I'm gonna. I was singing the joys of how easy the UX for Blue Jeans was. Now I'm going to offer my design critique at the tail end. That's a good bookend. I will download the chat. You will probably also download the chat, and then we'll have multiple copies of it. And I'll slap up the bibliography in the
Awesome.
thing, the slideshow, and we'll call it done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This has been super fun.